There were nights when I was deep in that world that carried a different kind of weight. I am not talking about something visible with the natural eye. I am talking about an atmosphere, a pressure, a heaviness that would settle over homes, over minds, over emotions, and most people could not explain why they suddenly felt restless, irritated, fearful, or spiritually drained. Back then, we paid attention to patterns like that. We watched for moments when people were more vulnerable, more distracted, more emotionally open, and less spiritually guarded. That was never accidental. It was strategic. Now let me be careful here. I am not here to tell you to fear a date on a calendar. I am not here to make you think that 2 nights hold some automatic power on their own. Dates themselves are not your enemy. God is still Lord over every day, every night, every hour, and every season. But I am here to tell you that there are times when the atmosphere feels unusually intense. And if you are spiritually asleep, you can mistake discernment for anxiety. And you can mistake a call to prayer for random discomfort. That is what I want to talk to you about today, because some of you have noticed that certain nights feel different. Your sleep gets disturbed. Your mind feels crowded. Small arguments break out for no reason. Temptation becomes stronger. Old thoughts come back. Fear tries to sit in the room with you. And because you do not understand the pattern, you end up reacting naturally to something you should have answered spiritually. I know this because I used to live on the other side of these patterns. I know what it means to exploit weariness, distraction, emotional openings, and spiritual passivity. But I also know this: when a believer is alert, covered in prayer, rooted in truth, and submitted to God, darkness loses the easy access it was counting on. That is why this message matters. Not to create panic, to create readiness. One of the biggest mistakes believers make is assuming that every spiritual moment feels the same. It does not. Just like your natural life has seasons, your spiritual life has moments of unusual pressure and unusual clarity. There are times when you can feel resistance increase for no obvious reason. The issue is not always that something dramatic is happening. Sometimes the issue is simply that your awareness is low while the pressure around you is high. When I was involved in occult practices, one thing was understood very clearly: tired people are easier to influence. Distracted people are easier to redirect. Emotionally wounded people are easier to provoke. Spiritually passive people are easier to oppress. That is why nighttime often became significant, not because darkness itself had authority, but because people were less guarded there. They were alone with their thoughts. They were carrying unresolved emotions. They were spiritually undisciplined, and that created openings. Some of you know exactly what I mean. You are strong during the day. You are busy. You are focused. But when night comes, everything changes. Thoughts get louder. Peace feels farther away. Memories return. The room feels heavier. You start sensing things you ignored earlier. That does not mean you should panic. It means you should recognize the pattern and respond with wisdom. The wrong response is fear. The right response is preparation. Because once you know that certain moments require greater spiritual alertness, you stop being surprised by the battle. And once you stop being surprised, you stop being easy to shake. The first thing you must do is refuse to agree with the atmosphere. That sounds simple, but it is where many people lose ground. A strange heaviness enters the room, and instead of confronting it, they internalize it. They say, maybe something is wrong with me. Maybe I am just losing peace. Maybe this fear is mine. Maybe this confusion is normal. And in that moment, what was trying to pressure you from the outside starts getting accepted on the inside. Do not do that. Not every feeling deserves agreement. When a night feels oppressive, speak immediately. Do not wait until your thoughts spiral. Do not wait until fear has already built momentum. Open your mouth and establish spiritual authority over your environment. Declare peace over your home. Declare the presence of God over your room. Reject fear, confusion, torment, and heaviness. Remind yourself that what enters your awareness does not automatically gain permission in your life. That was something I understood on the other side. Atmospheres seek agreement. Suggestion seeks acceptance. Pressure seeks surrender. But when a believer speaks truth early, that cycle gets interrupted. Some of you need to stop analyzing every dark feeling and start resisting it. You do not need to study every shadow in order to turn on the light. You need to respond quickly, confidently, and spiritually. Now let me get even more practical. Sometimes people feel unusual heaviness at night because they have left too many things open in their inner life. I am not talking about superstition. I am talking about real spiritual vulnerability. Bitterness left unaddressed. Fear entertained repeatedly. Compromise normalized. Minds constantly fed by darkness, chaos, lust, anger, and confusion. Then, when the night becomes difficult, they wonder why peace feels so far away. What you entertain in private affects what you can withstand under pressure. In those former circles, we knew that people did not have to be fully committed to darkness to be weakened by it. Repeated exposure was enough. Little agreements were enough. Quiet compromises were enough. The enemy does not always begin by demanding everything. Sometimes he just asks for one open window. So if you want to be stronger on heavy nights, start by shutting doors before the pressure comes. Guard what enters your mind. Be honest about your habits. Remove what feeds fear. Stop partnering with what drains discernment. The atmosphere around you is not the only issue. Sometimes the access point is within you. That is not condemnation. That is clarity. And clarity is a gift. Because once you identify the opening, you can close it. This is the part the enemy hates most. He wants the night to become a place of fear, fatigue, passivity, and mental noise. But when a believer turns that same moment into prayer, worship, and surrender, the whole direction changes. Some of you have been treating difficult nights like interruptions, when in reality they may be invitations. Invitations to pray more deeply. Invitations to become more discerning. Invitations to strengthen spiritual habits you have neglected. Invitations to stop living casually and start living watchfully. I learned this after leaving that world. What used to be a time of vulnerability became a time of encounter. What used to be a place of pressure became a place of prayer. And the more I responded to heaviness with worship, the less intimidating that heaviness became. So when a night feels off, do not just try to get through it. Consecrate it. Pray intentionally. Read truth out loud. Worship in a low voice if you need to. Sit quietly before God. Invite His peace into the room. Let the night become holy ground instead of contested ground. Because darkness counts on your silence. But heaven responds to surrendered attention. Let me leave you with this. You do not need to fear certain nights. You do not need to obsess over dates. You do not need to live intimidated by atmospheres, patterns, or moments of pressure. But you do need discernment. You do need discipline. And you do need to stop acting like every heavy moment is meaningless. Some nights are opportunities to become more spiritually awake, not afraid, awake. So if you sense unusual heaviness, do not magnify it. Meet it with truth. If your peace is challenged, do not surrender your ground. Establish it again. If your mind feels crowded, do not agree with every thought. Bring yourself back under God's authority. And if a night feels spiritually intense, do not waste that moment in panic. Use it to pray, to realign, and to remember who rules over your home. Because the lesson is not that the night is powerful. The lesson is that God is greater, and a prepared believer is not easy to shake.